He says those responsible need to be held accountable
for their respective roles in planning that fateful night, in failing to render aid, and in leaving Tim to die in their fraternity house.
More fraternity members could face new or different charges this week. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's an idea that many people are looking into, that being universal basic income. Still, Chris Woodward reports on the concerns of such a program.
The idea behind universal basic income is to have the government give some or all residents a certain amount of cash. In doing so, it could replace welfare programs, which is one of the reasons some people on the right are open to discussion about UBI, especially if the universal basic income is an amount that would mean recipients still need to work. Here in the U.S., cities including Stockton, California, and San Francisco are exploring the idea, while the nation of Finland just announced it plans to end its universal basic income after 2 years. Finland was considered the first European country to pay a monthly check of nearly $700 to its unemployed citizens between 25 and 58 years of age. Aparna Mathur of the American Enterprise Institute says it makes sense for Finland to pull the plug.
There was an estimate by the OECD saying that you would need to raise income taxes by 30% in order to fund a UBI program in Finland generally. So I'm sure that's a huge concern for the government, and that's one of the reasons why it's not being continued. So it sort of echoes what I think my thinking on this has been, which is that we don't know how to fund such a program. We need to figure out where the revenues are going to come from. And secondly, we need to be doing more to actually help people find jobs and not just paying them cash.
I'm Chris Woodward.
Upcoming elections are crucial to advance pro-life legislation. Charlie Butts explains why.
President Trump has already expressed his intent to sign pro-life legislation such as a bill to ban abortions at 20 weeks, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. It passed in the House but failed to obtain the 60 votes necessary in the Senate to even debate the measure. Marjorie Dannenfelser is president of the Susan B. Anthony List.
There are still three branches of government. The president would have signed that 5-month pain-capable bill if the Senate had been able to send it to him. He asked for it. He spoke to that very eloquently. But if the Senate can't pass the bill and have the Congress send him that bill, he simply can't sign it.
Under the present system, a mere 2 or 3 senators can effectively prevent the full Senate from advancing a pro-life bill to the floor for a vote.
Between now and this November will be the biggest opportunity we have to change the Senate, to further transform it into a very strong pro-life majority.
So it's imperative for pro-life voters to organize, to promote the message in the next several months and then get out the vote. That's especially important because Planned Parenthood and its left-wing allies have already announced plans to spend at least $20 million to defeat pro-life politicians. I'm Charlie Butts.
The man accused of going on a shooting spree at a Florida airport last year will be spared the death penalty.
Esteban Santiago will not face the death penalty and will instead plead guilty to flying to Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport, getting a gun from his luggage at the bag claim, and then shooting, killing 5 and wounding 6. The 28-year-old former National Guardsman had been known to authorities approaching the FBI in Alaska, saying he was hearing voices and believed the government was controlling his mind. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hi, I'm Larry Nix with Defining Moments. Join me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk. We talk to people of all ages, stages, phases, and places. From all walks of life, background, and cultures about serious matters, life-altering encounters, second chances, and even how to face life moving forward. Sometimes you hear us get emotional, sometimes you hear us laugh. But more importantly, you'll hear the truth that will set you free. All in Defining Moments every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is always patient, love will blow your mind if you let it, oh, 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 I'm gonna give it to him, I'm gonna give it to him
Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. It's my pleasure to be with you. In fact, this is what? A fantastic day to be an American. It's a fantastic day to be on the radio and to get information out and kind of just get with what's going on right now, which is fantastic weather. Here in the Midwest, specifically here in Missouri, we are enjoying finally spring after this just unbelievably cold entrance into the springtime. So it's great to be with you today. We have a fantastic guest lineup. We have two guests. We actually had someone I just heard back. First, we're going to have first hour Taylor Griffin, editor of Roughly Explained. He's a former spokesperson for the White House and the Treasury Department under the George W. Bush administration. We're going to be speaking with him, talking about some news of the day, catching up with him. And then I'll clue you in on our second guest who will have second hour a little bit later in the program. We're firming up details on that now. It's live radio, live and direct to you. Go to urbanfamilytalk.com, hit the subscribe button. Also, we still have the tickets, registration for the conference, the Marriage and Family Conference. That's still going on. And we need you. We need you to register for that because we're preparing a fantastic time for you later on, August 17th and 18th in Tupelo, Mississippi. So today on the program, we're going to have our encouragement up first. We're going to talk about Governor Greitens and some information that's out in, you guessed it, the Post-Dispatch. We still occasionally will go over there for news and information. And Tony Messenger, who I happen to know and have jousted with on Twitter before, and we've kind of made a peaceable, we have a pinky truce because we're both parents. He's got a son in the same age range as our three children. In fact, he slots in between the 1 year we don't have a kid. And it's fascinating because I bumped into him at a television appearance here in St. Louis about a year and a half ago. And we were in the elevator riding up. And he said, "How have you been? It's been such a long time since I've bumped into you." And I said, "Oh, so busy with the kids." And he said, "How old are your kids again?" And I tell you what, whatever you've got going on with someone, the minute you start talking about your kids and then they chime in with theirs, that stuff just dissipates. So our previous interaction on the online on the Twitters, it just went into the distant memory. And I heard about his son and the sports that he plays and the school he attends here locally in St. Louis. And he heard about our three kids and what they were doing with their sports at the time and the school they were attending at the time. And we got off that elevator kind of feeling like the same way you feel when you bump into parents at your kid's school. You're all in it together. So Tony Messenger has this really interesting piece out about what's going on with Governor Greitens. The lesson in Al Watkins' secret $100,000 that dark money begets dark money. I'm going to share some of that with you. But before we get to that, and we're also going to talk about the Iran nuclear deal falling apart, especially since the revelations from Bibi Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, and how their Mossad intelligence services carted off a ton of paper information proving that the Iranians have never stopped working towards nuclear proliferation and the nuclear bomb. And then Meghan McCain actually breaks down the whole situation with the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The Hill has now announced they will no longer attend, and that's pretty big. The Hill is an amazingly large resource for left and right of center individuals. People across the political spectrum read The Hill, and for them to say they'll no longer attend is a major blow to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And then we're going to hear in the last segment of Hour 2, we're going to listen to some audio of Condoleezza Rice, and we're going to talk about her thoughts on this from her position. Historically speaking, she knows where all the dead bodies are buried, and she knows why they're there. And so it's interesting to hear her take on why really the deal has been blown from day one, this Iran deal, and why we shouldn't be worried about it. So first, I'm going to give you an update on Thrive. That is our local life-affirming resource for women. They provide all of the services that Planned Parenthood doesn't, from reproductive testing to you name it. They provide it. They actually have the beautiful mobile units that bring mammograms and STD testing and gynecological services to women where they are in their neighborhoods, suburban, rural, and urban neighborhoods. And they have actually raised $3,169,000. They have reduced their cost to save an unborn life down to $1,291. And They've administered over 3,000 STD tests to women in the local St. Louis area. They've brought a number of women to Jesus Christ, to the knowledge, the true saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And they have over 11,000 hours of volunteer work from people out there who love what they're doing and are just coming alongside them to volunteer. Now, I want to point to something that's happening with Thrive that is exciting to me, and that's their expansion. They started off here in St. Louis. After the rebranding efforts by Bridget Van Means, they have now 2 locations on the continent of Africa, one in Liberia and one in Uganda. They have a world-class site in Ukraine, which is located in Europe. They have one site about to open up in Central Oregon. Actually, 3 sites, one in Redmond, one in Prineville, and one in Bend. They have another site about to open in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. They have one that's in feasibility studies in Phoenix, Arizona. They have a world-class site in East Dallas, Central Dallas, and West Dallas. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about this little map. See all those little blips on that map? These are areas where instead of women having to go to a Planned Parenthood to get reproductive health care information, they can go to a Thrive. That's what these sites represent. This is where you put your rubber to the road. You say, God, how can you use me? He tells you, and then instead of you sharing back and going, I don't know if I can do that, you say, okay, now how do I get that done? And you put the work in, and God gets the glory for it. And this is amazing to me because we're talking about sites that were previously not experiencing the kind of foot traffic that they could make an impact in the lives of young women. And now that they're converting to the Thrive model, they are doing the work of Christ for these women. And that means for some of them, it's post-abortion counseling. Some of these women have already made a decision and they're still welcome. This is the true tolerant service model where no matter what decision you've made, they're still there to help you in whatever stage you meet them in. So I wanted to give you that update because I've asked in the past for people to donate to Thrive if you have a burning desire to give money to an organization. And I know now that they're expanding across the country, you can give to the St. Louis chapter as I do, or you can give to one of the other sites across the country. So if you want more information about this or an image of this, reach out to me on Facebook and I'll shoot it to you so you can see where the locations are that are nearest to you. So right now I want to move into the encouragement. And today's encouragement is Philippians 2:13, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Now, why do I say that's the encouragement for today? Well, it's pretty simple because when you're doing what God has for you to do, you can get tired. We're humans. Our frames are dust. We have the ability to get a little worn down. So if you get worn down, you can begin to question whether you're doing the right thing. You can begin to question whether or not you are really in God's will or if God has that particular thing for you to do. That's an attack of the enemy. God does not have that doubt or that regret in store for you. That's not his plan for you. But when you find yourself there, the first thing we have to do is to remind ourselves, wait a minute, God has good things for me and he orders my steps and he works all things out for my good. So how can I figure this thing out? How can I get out of this feeling and into what God has for me? And so that's why this verse is so important. And I want to read you the New Living Translation because it illuminates it a little bit further. It says, for God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. So that to me is the part that it kind of cracks everything open. It's like, wow, it's not just that I have this desire and it comes from some strange place or some place within myself. It's that God has given me the desire to do this. Okay, so if he's given me the desire, he's not a God that he should lie. He's also giving me the power to do what pleases him. And then that spurs me on because we all get there. We all get there in the middle of our work or the middle of the quiet in the wee hours of the morning or in the middle of getting ready to help do something else where you think, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not seeing any progress here. How can this be what God has for me to do? Well, if he gave you the desire to do it, he's going to give you the power to do it. And he's going to see you all the way through it. So let's get a little bit more into what the word says about this. You've got 2 Chronicles 30, verse 12, it says, the hand of God was also on Judah to give them one heart to do what the king and the princes commanded by the word of God. And Job 33:29 says, behold, God does all these oftentimes with men. Luke 2:14 says, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men on whom his favor rests. So God's favor rests upon us. He wants us to do what he's called us to do by giving us the desires of our heart. Once we connect all of that together, then when the feeling creeps up, this isn't working. I'm struggling. I'm having too much difficulty getting this done. And so therefore it must not be what God has for me. Nope. There's nowhere in the word where God says you'll have no difficulty. There's nowhere where he says everything that I give you to do is going to be smooth and easy like a cakewalk and you're just going to sing all the way down to the completion of your goals. No. Never is that to be the way that we approach these things. But he's equipped us with the ability to complete these good works. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think yourself more highly than you ought, but think of yourself with sober judgment according to the measure of faith God has given you. So he gives us a measure of faith. We're not supposed to get puffed up and think too much about ourselves, but we are supposed to be walking in what we know, which is that we're seated with Christ in the heavenly realms. That's what happens when we pray. When we access God and we let him work through us, we have the mind of Christ. We are able to do all things through Christ, and he dwells within us, makes his home in our heart, and enables us through the power of the Holy Spirit to see, hear, and know all things according to his will. Is that not amazing? Is that not exciting? Is that not something that you could just get crazy about and feel like, okay, you know what? Now I can get this done. I don't see anything happening in the actual, my reality is nothing's happening. But something's happening because God continually works these things out for our good. So we know he's doing that, and that's more than enough encouragement for me. So please check out Instagram. I have I believe I shared this one this morning or just a little bit ago, this verse, Philippians 2:13. And thank you so much for being with us and sharing the show. If you're on Instagram, if you're on Periscope, if you're on YouTube, wherever you are and you're live streaming this show, share it. Hit the share button. Make sure people know why you're listening to Stacy on the Right, why you know you get your news and information from Stacy on the Right, why you know that not only is it Stacy on the Right, but Urban Family Talk and all of the other networks that carry this program, they're doing it because there's something good here that they want everyone to have access to. And where else are you going to get your news and information? I know there are a ton of other places, but this is the only place where you're going to get it like this from me. So we have Taylor Griffin up next in the next segment, and we have this information on Governor Greitens. And so it's a little bit, it's lengthy, but it's not too difficult for us to kind of meander through. Suffice it to say, and I've talked about this on the program, and if you're tuning in for the first time today, welcome to the show. I got to say, I give my little disclaimer out every single time. Governor Greitens was not my candidate in the primary, but after he was the nominee, I kind of said, okay, he's the guy. He's definitely better than some, Democrat. We've had a Democrat for 16 years here in Missouri as governor. We need change. And he has pleasantly surprised me with his actions on the pro-life area, tax cutting, government management, things like that. He's also made some significant enemies in his actions on the tax. It's tax credits. We have a tax credit scheme here in Missouri that rewards developers with tax breaks. And in trying to dismantle that, he's made some enemies who have now banded together to try to take him out of office. They're using his own actions to do it, but it's kind of sad to see. So we'll dig into that. We'll have our guest up next, Taylor Griffin. Right now we have important news and information for you, so stay right there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison, and we are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to save babies' lives through ultrasound. Here's how a nurse describes the power of an ultrasound.
Last week, just one example of a mom who came in was very abortion-minded, and when she saw the picture of her baby on ultrasound and heard that beating heart, it was a defining moment that just broke her, and she said, I just can't allow this baby to be killed.
By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time.
I cannot tell you how many times a baby's life is saved through ultrasound. It's just an incredible tool.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I remember reading a refreshing, insightful book, but then I came across a section in the book in which the author tried to give an elaborate and almost forced explanation as to why a certain person did some very bad things. I placed the book down and kind of mulled over in my mind what I just read. I thought maybe, just maybe, this guy did these bad things simply because he was wicked and sinful. Now, I don't mean to downplay contributing factors to our propensity to do wrong things, and sometimes those factors are quite complicated or lodged in our backgrounds, but honestly, we do bad things because, at the core, we're wicked. There's bad stuff inside of our hearts. Listen to Psalm 36, verse 1. Transgression speaks to the ungodly within his heart. There's no fear of God before his eyes. Did you hear that? Transgression, not some dysfunctional relationship, but transgression speaks to the ungodly within his heart. There is no fear of God before his eyes. That verse is pretty straightforward. In fact, it says evil is present in us. Transgression, by its very nature, knows no boundaries. It means to trespass, to go beyond limits, to do what is not right. Transgression says, I don't like those boundaries, and I'm going to cross them. Within all of us is the tendency of the arrogant disregard of consequences. We want to do what we want to do, whether it's lying or lust or acting out on that lust or manipulating people or greed. Transgression speaks inside our hearts. It says, do that, do that, do that. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Don't ever underestimate the depths of your own wickedness or make excuses for bad, sinful behavior.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hello, and welcome back to the program. We've got a great guest with us, Taylor Griffin. He's the editor of Roughly Explained, former spokesperson for the White House and the Treasury Department under the George W. Bush administration. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on today.
It's my pleasure, Stacy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Robert Mueller, help us to understand just what is going on here, because contrary to what we've been told about Robert Mueller being this staunch Republican, it sounds to me like he's a bit of a Democrat, like almost everyone in government, which means he's not really on President Trump's side per se, and perhaps he shouldn't be. But tell us what you know.
Well, I think that it's easy to put people all in political boxes, but not everyone really operates in a political box. And I think Robert Mueller is an example of that. I think you're right that he isn't necessarily on President Trump's side. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's on the Democrat side either. If you know people who are in positions like his, they tend to have this feeling that they're independent and that they're trying to get the truth and that kind of thing. Now, whether that ends up creating a situation where it's sort of where they sort of get a fever to go after their target and get overzealous is another question. But generally, they're not. Robert Mueller's not thinking in a political context here.
Okay, so what can we expect? Because it feels like it's been going on since we were babies. When is it going to end?
So true. Well, I think that what we can expect is that, first of all, these things take time. Second of all, as they've gone through and investigated it, there's been a lot of branches that they've wanted to explore. I think where we are right now, it does not look like that there is a substantial indication of so-called collusion, which is really no such thing with collusion, but let's say coordination with Russia in their election meddling in 2016 on Trump's part directly. There's still some question about whether or not people involved with this campaign were in touch with Russia and how much they were coordinating. I think that the main thrust of the investigation when it comes to Trump now are the things that Trump did to try to get the investigation to go away, and which is unfortunate in terms of obstruction of justice. So the final outcome of this is probably not that Trump's going to be indicted. There's pretty good legal evidence that presidents can't be criminally indicted, but I think what you'll see is that Robert Mueller will eventually produce a report detailing what he has found and hand it over to Congress to decide what to do next.
Okay, so we want to be as clear as possible, and I really thank you for coming on today and helping us out with these details, because we're everybody. I don't know anybody who's not interested in figuring out when is this thing going to be over. It's like the reverse of Christmas. Like everyone's waiting for Christmas Day, and you're like, whoo, 30 more sleeps, 20 more sleeps, 5 more sleeps. With this, we're like, when is it over? Like, tell us how many sleeps we have until this is done so we can move on. So you're saying not likely there'll be an indictment, but yes, there's possibly going to be some recommendation of censure or something like that through Congress because he didn't just sit there and take it?
Well, I think that the concerns will be around obstruction of justice on Trump directly. And yeah, that's exactly right. Did he, there's a difference between sitting there and taking it, or did he abuse his power in order to try to make the investigation go away? And that's a question that they'll be looking at. But how many sleeps we have left? I think that one key point, usually in these kind of investigations, the last thing they do is interview the target of the investigation. And the fact that they're in discussions about doing an interview with Trump in the relatively near future is an indication that that'll sort of be the last major milestone in the investigation. So, I think that once they resolve an interview with Trump, or whether or not they're going to get one, I think that sort of will move us into the end stage of this. So hopefully over the next few months. But the Mueller operation is not talking and not leaking, so it's very hard to assess directly.
Oh, but did you see? Come on, Taylor. I know you saw the questions that. So apparently there's 48 questions that Mueller has submitted to Trump's attorneys, and someone has leaked them. So everybody on the left is saying Mueller's team doesn't leak, so this has to be Trump, and this is more obstruction of justice. Now, I got to think that President Trump would not want these questions out there. He wouldn't want that.
Like you, Stacey, I'm on the right. I think that the left is completely out of control with this thing and is blowing it out of all proportion. But as far as who leaked this, so what these are a list of questions that Trump's lawyers wrote down. It's their notes. It comes from the notes of Trump's lawyers, not from Mueller directly. So back in April, there was a meeting between Trump's attorneys and Robert Mueller when Mueller was trying to get them to convince their client, Trump, to do a interview with him. And in that discussion, he talked about the questions that he would ask. They took notes. Those notes are what we're seeing now. Now, who leaked them? I don't know. We do have one member of the legal team that's left since then, John Dowd. So if I had to guess, that'd probably be the first person I would guess.
Okay. So did you read the list of questions? Because they're on the Daily Caller. They're everywhere. Did you take a look at them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what do we like? So for the listeners they're in their car or they're doing some, afternoon stuff before they pick up kids, or they're at work live streaming, what would you say were the most revelatory questions, or is this a huge nothing burger?
Well, I think a lot of it is things we already knew. There are four broad categories of things he's asking about. Michael Flynn, 1, James Comey, 2, Jeff Sessions, and finally campaign coordination with Russia. And so most of these questions are around what did you know when? Because, for example, if Trump knew that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI and was potentially criminally liable for doing so when he asked James Comey to take it easy on him, In an obstruction of justice context, that's a different that's a different thing. And the other thing that Trump will be asking a lot about is James Comey's firing. Trump has the absolute right as President of the United States to fire the FBI director. It's absolutely his right to do for any reason or no reason at all. But when Trump told Lester Holt that he had the Russia investigation in mind, that raised another obstruction of justice flag. So, but what really matters when it comes to obstruction of justice is sort of a criminal intent, a criminal mindfulness. You're trying to do something wrong. So, what was Trump really thinking when he did that? And so that's going to be something that Mueller would want to explore. Was he really doing it to try to obstruct an investigation, or was there some other reason that he wanted to fire Mueller? And so that's an important question. And the other things are Jeff Sessions and all the pressure he's put on Jeff Sessions not to recuse himself. And then finally, the campaign coordination. He'll ask about that Trump Tower meeting that's so famous, which, by the way, I don't think there was any collusion that went on there, and some other things. What did Paul Manafort do? Are you aware that Paul Manafort possibly talked to the Russians in terms of coordinating with the campaign? We don't know that to be true, but the fact that question's being asked is kind of interesting because that may be a line of inquiry that they haven't publicly disclosed yet that they may be going down.
Okay. So you have stated a couple times now during this interview that you don't feel there was collusion. Do you feel there was obstruction of justice? And if so, was it to the level where we could see impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump?
Well, impeachment is a political process. It's an inherently political process. The Constitution says that the Constitution says high crimes and misdemeanor is grounds for impeachment. What high crimes and misdemeanors means? Entirely up to the House of Representatives. And it could be criminal activities that are impeachable. It could be not criminal activities. It's whatever the House of Representatives interprets that to mean. So I think that whether or not we see impeachment against Donald Trump depends on who controls the House. This fall, if the Democrats take over, then there's a pretty good chance that they're going to try to move articles of impeachment. If the Republicans maintain control, I think that's doubtful. I think that there's a lot of legal questions about the extent to which the president can obstruct justice at all in exercising his Article 2 authorities. There are people who would argue that it's impossible for the president to obstruct justice because he has unfettered power to do these things. And then the other side of it is, from a political perspective, do Republicans really want to get in this? If it's a kind of questionable case, if it's not like absolute certain that Trump was running around, like Richard Nixon, trying to put pressure on people to stop this investigation in ways that we don't already know, Republicans aren't going to impeach him. The Democrats might.
Okay, so let's talk about that impeachment thing, because I know the first thing that I think of when I hear this, and I've read up on impeachment, and I feel like I should know much more about it than I do, but what ends up happening is that information is not needed on a regular basis, so it gets pushed way back in the memory banks, and I believe mine has been actually dumped off as unnecessary information because more important things have to happen, like dinner schedules, menus, who needs to be picked up, who needs to register for college, stuff like that takes precedence. You know what I mean, Taylor? So,
like most Americans.
Yeah, so I guess the question that runs through my mind every time I hear them talk about impeachment is, let's say one of our worst nightmares comes true and we wake up in November and the Democrats are in control of the House, but they don't have the Senate. They start impeachment proceedings immediately like spider monkeys, and then it goes to where? Like, what happens if it's only the House and they don't control the Senate? And obviously the president is not going to agree to impeach himself. So what happens?
Sure. So removal from office is a two-step process. First is impeachment, which is conducted in the House of Representatives. Think of impeachment as sort of like a grand jury, right? Is there probable cause to bring charges of impeachment? And if that's the case, and the House passes articles of impeachment, then it goes to the Senate. Now, the Senate acts as the Senate will try the president and really conduct a trial. And you saw this actually in Bill Clinton's administration, where he was impeached by the House of Representatives, and then it went to trial in the Senate. He was acquitted in the Senate. So the vote required to remove a president from office is a supermajority, 2/3, I believe, in the Senate. And so it's very unlikely that the Senate's going to is going to vote to remove the president from office. So I think that impeachment will probably happen, but removal from office probably will not, because there's very little chance the Republicans will lose the Senate. So this is going to be a lot of theater between now and 2019 going on around impeachment in Russia.
Does this play well for them? Help me out. How did the Democrats spend, because it'll take months and months and months. Impeachment hearings will take a month, not a month, but almost a year. Remember when it was Bill Clinton, everything was the details of his extramarital affair with Lewinsky. So all kinds of things came up and were a part of not just the news during the day when the kids were at school, but the evening news. And the Democrats will want to not just try him on obstruction or anything like that. They'll want to bring out all of his extramarital affairs, anything that's ever happened that's been risque or disgusting, things we don't want to know. That'll be the subject of the impeachment hearings. And so even though the president might never be removed from office, the fact that they sully up our time with like a year's worth of this nonsense, how does that play for the Democrats in 2020?
It's a good question. And I think that there's an argument that it sort of ended up playing against the Republicans in the long term with Bill Clinton, right? Because people felt like, okay, this is really kind of out of control. So it has the potential to backfire. Partisans will not be able to help themselves. Even if it's not in their interest, you can expect them to go after this. I think in the short term, in the midterm elections, I think that the threat of impeachment and the threat of what happens to the president, who is very popular among Republicans, may be an important factor in motivating Republicans to go to the polls in ways that they haven't been in these special elections. The Republicans have done very poorly in the special elections over the past year, but which has led a lot of people to say, well, Republicans will probably lose the House, which is possible. But one thing that I think may motivate Republicans is the threat of impeachment. And so I think politically it may end up, even in the short term, playing against the Democrats, because Republicans will be determined to deny them the power to do that.
I've been talking about it here on the show, Taylor. I've been hitting it home as often as possible. And I'm not trying to excuse any behavior. I'm not, I am not a fan of infidelity. But if we're talking about which person is best equipped to lead the nation on the Republican side, we already know the answer to that because Donald Trump won the primary. And now that he's the president, to contest the election result by continually trying to impeach him and remove him from office shows that the Democrats don't have a playbook from which to operate in. They actually lack the ability to sell their policies to Americans in such a way that they can retain power. If they had great policies, Hillary Clinton's email and any of that other stuff she had going on wouldn't have mattered. The reason why Republicans voted for Trump was not because we loved him so much or loved his history or his past or his actions or even his tweets. It was because the platform the Republicans put together during their platform process, coupled with what Donald Trump promised to do on the campaign trail, motivated people to come out. I'm hopeful that you're dead right on everything you've just shared, because I feel hopeful. You've been great. Thank you, Taylor.
Stacey, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk again soon. That's Taylor Griffin, editor of Roughly Explained. He's a former spokesperson for the White House and Treasury Department under the George W. Bush administration, and we can all tell why. He's got some astute analysis, and we're grateful for it. We'll be back with more. Me talking to you, giving you everything you need to know. And yes, we're going to talk about that bag of $50,000 in cash. You stay right there.
right? If there were no deal in place right now,
No,
you would
I
have
disagree-
no
I
idea
disagree with
what
that.
was going on, and how would that make Israel safer? If by all accounts, Iran
I
has
disagree
slowed
with
or
that.
stopped what it was doing prior to the deal, how would you be safer without a deal?
There are many premises that are incorrect in your statement.
Please.
The first is we'd be better off. We're better off because we have this deal. No, you're not. Because this deal, the fact that you have a dangerous deal, the fact that Iran is keeping or not violating a dangerous deal doesn't make it less dangerous. It's completely flawed. It's based on lies. It's based on the fact that they hid the nuclear weapons program and knowledge that they stored up. They didn't come clean with it. And it's also based on the fact that Iran will somehow be a docile neighbor. That's not what's happening. The opposite has happened. I said from the start, look, if you want peace, if you want security, you should oppose that deal as structured. I said that. I said that Iran is not going to be more pacific, more moderate once you sign the deal. And it's exactly what has happened. Iran has done the very opposite. It's taken in the money, the billions, and it's using it to conquer Yemen, to fire rockets on Arabia, to colonize Syria militarily, to arm Hezbollah with the most dangerous missiles on earth, to call for Israel's annihilation, to spread its totalitarian wings throughout the Middle East, and to oppress its people inside Iran to boot.
Wow. So this is a continuation of what we've been discussing about. You've got Bibi Netanyahu with this whirlwind kind of surprise press conference where he has a huge screen behind him and he begins to put on a presentation sharing how their intelligence services, Mossad, have gone into Iran on secret covert mission to discover whether or not they're abiding by their promises that they made when they signed the Iran nuclear proliferation deal, which basically says they will not continue to try to gain access to nuclear bombs, to create them, to become a nuclear nation. And what's so funny about it is they got all their candy up front. Instead of having to earn it, President Obama was like, oh, do you agree not to do these things? Okay, here's all your money. Here's all your stuff in cash. Here, you can start negotiating to build airliners and things like that with our beautiful companies, Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, just start working on it. The same people who helped to destroy our Twin Towers using aircraft, we're now allowing them to negotiate and to order new aircraft to update their fleet. We don't even know if their pilots are terroristically minded. I mean, come on. Where does logic and common sense enter into this? And I'm so tired of people saying to me in messaging and things like that, well, Stacey, he was the first black president, and I'm tired of you criticizing him. I'm tired of you acting like the fact that he has a permanent tan, and I do too, means he can't be criticized. If you operate like that in your regular life, man, it must be chaos for you because you can't criticize anyone who's black just because they're black. Or, please explain to me how this works. I don't need you to explain it. I know how this works. It's a double standard. You can't complain about anything that President Obama did, even things that placed our country in jeopardy because he's black. But everybody else, open season. I don't see anybody saying you can't criticize me because I'm black. I welcome the criticism. I just want you to make sense when you do it. When you come at me, understand I'm not on here saying things or making stuff up out of whole cloth or telling you about my feelings, unless I'm talking about the kids. I'm talking about what I've learned through research and reading and speaking to other experts, which we do here on the program every day. That's why you're listening. You're not listening to hear my feelings on things. You're not listening for me to sit up here and talk about what I think about things. Yes, I give my opinion, but it's based upon the research and information that you don't have to do the work. I'm doing it. And then I'm bringing it to you right here, right now. I'm giving it to you straight. Then you get to make up your own mind. I'm not making up your mind for you, but I'll give you enough information for you to say, oh, you know what? I don't like that. Or I do like that. Whatever it is that you're making up your mind for, you can get the info here and then go forward and do what you need to do. That being said, I think it's fascinating that people are actually pushing back on Bibi Netanyahu. I mean, where do they think he got the ton of paper from? That they just made it up? No, they went into Iran. They went into the country. This is some gutsy stuff right here. This is the kind of stuff that will inspire others to courage and will make other people who don't like law and order and honesty and truth, it'll make them mad. But people who like that kind of stuff, people who are inspired by greatness, will see what Bibi Netanyahu and the Mossad did, and they'll understand that if you don't know and you want to know, there's a way you can know. You can go in and get the information yourself. The Iranians have got to be running around in circles mad about the fact that they've been found out and outed in such a public way. It's an embarrassment for them. Not only have they been lying, but they've been going around behind all of the other countries that were on their side. Everybody should be embarrassed. Canada, Great Britain, Germany, all the countries that have been looking down their little snooty noses at us, talking about your president wants to extract your country from the nuclear deal. And then what happens? We find out that they haven't been abiding by it anyway. So ending it means almost less than nothing, if there's such a thing. So you've got that going on. Now, he had a little bit more to say. He said, if you want peace, you have to oppose this deal. So what we've been told is by leftists and Obama surrogates, if we want peace, we have to have this deal. This deal is the only way to peace. There's no other option. There's no discussion can be had. This is the deal. This is the peace. Let's get it. Well, not according to Bibi Netanyahu in number 4.
The whole premise that this deal somehow guarantees a safer, more moderate Iran is wrong. This deal paves Iran's path to a nuclear arsenal. If you got rid of it, the first thing that would happen is you would crash Iran's money machine, in which it's pursuing its dreams of a conquest and empire. They're funding it with billions, tens of billions of dollars, their aggression throughout the region. And this deal facilitates it. If you take away the deal, they're going to be in a huge economic problem. Second thing, I think you have to insist that you actually dismantle the components that allow Iran to produce an arsenal of nuclear weapons. If you don't, and you do nothing, then I predict that what you'll do is head right into a wall. You'll head into a terrible conflict and perhaps a terrible war in which Iran would be armed with nuclear weapons. That's bad.
It is bad. So, I'll leave it there. I think he really encapsulated it. If you're iffy on it, if you feel like, no, I do believe that there were good parts of it. And remember, we've had guests on the program, experts on Middle Eastern policy, who said that the Iranian deal was the best that we could get. And I believe if you take that in context, the unspoken last few words of that sentence are under President Obama, who that's the amount of will that he had, was to basically kowtow to the Iranians and give them what they asked for. In a different negotiation, one in which you have someone who's much more strongly willed involved, such as the negotiation that will occur with President Trump, then there are different parameters. The game is different. The rules of engagement are different. All of it, everything's up for grabs again. And the Iranians would be much more amenable to terms that don't leave their country crippled economically and unable to trade on the open market with free countries. That obviously there's a way to move forward. And we'll hear some suggestions from Condoleezza Rice in later segment. But people are asking on the Facebook page and other places about my talking about the $50,000 in a bag of cash. So I had a little, I'm on a number of little text threads. But one of the text threads that I'm on with a group of my friends who are very politically minded, astute, expert type chicks, fantastic women, they were tweeting about or texting about this latest development with the governor. So we're talking about Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, the man is under attack right now. And I'm not saying it that way because I condone his behavior, the extramarital affair before he became the governor, his behavior towards the woman that was involved, and the allegations against him. We don't know what's substantiated because we haven't seen any proof or evidence. And the prosecutor is a partisan. She's a leftist Democrat who is undertaking this effort and to basically undo the results of the election. Now, the little finger in the air or caveat here is that all of us can take a lesson from this, that, when you make a mistake, the result of that mistake can come back and bite you at the most inopportune moment. Okay? So look at it that way. It's a cautionary tale. That's what my mom used to tell me when we were little. Something would happen like, oh, that's a cautionary tale. It's basically a warning to the rest of us. Everyone makes mistakes. Now the result of those mistakes are coming out for Governor Greitens. So the article that's in the newspaper here locally, our paper of record here in St. Louis, is written by Tony Messenger. The title is The Lesson in Al Watkins' Secret $100,000, Dark Money Begets Dark Money. So you've got, he does a bit of a historical look back to when Matt Blunt was the governor of the state of Missouri. We're going to skip through all of that because the most important parts are what's going on now. So these are the lucrative tax credits for low-income housing projects that are, the tax credits are awarded on a yearly basis. Now, there's a problem with it now because last year, Governor Greitens became the third straight Missouri governor to try to reform the system, and he was the first one to succeed because he appointed the biggest tax credit critic of all, State Senator Jason Crowell, Republican from Cape Girardeau, to the Missouri Housing Development Corporation. Now, stick with me here because this is going to make sense to you in a second when I explain this. And you can also check in your own home state to see what kind of tax credits are going on. For my Missouri listeners, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you are listening from another state, from one of the other 20 states that this program airs in, you're thinking low-income housing tax credits. What does that have to do with me? Well, the tax credits are a part of the budget. You pay taxes in the state. So it's your money that the developers are getting awarded for doing these housing developments. So State Senator Jason Crowell actually engineered a vote to award no state tax credits for the coming year. They did this to force the Missouri legislature to deal with the issue. So now we get the name Albert Watkins. He's a lawyer in Clayton, Missouri. And to help understand that, Clayton is a suburban city. So it's in the suburbs of the city of St. Louis, but it is the seat of county government. We have city-county governance here. So the city is one entity, St. Louis City, 66 square miles, 315,000 people are residents of St. Louis City. They have their own taxation structure. They're a part of the state, but they are their own entity. And then we have St. Louis County. It's its own entity, has its own police force, own county government, own jail system, everything, and a different set of taxes. So you've got Clayton. This is the location. This guy is from Clayton. His name's Albert Watkins. He's an attorney, and he represents the ex-husband of the woman who had the affair with Governor Greitens. So how does this all dovetail together? Well, the governor allegedly took a photo of the woman that he had the affair with. She was in a state of undress. And then there were some audio recordings of the ex-husband talking with his ex-wife about the affair. And those audio recordings were sent to the prosecutor, who's a Democrat. The police and the government, they declined to investigate. And so she took it upon herself to prosecute the case herself using independent investigators instead of using police because they'd already said they weren't going to look into it because it was a private matter. Well, now you've got Governor Greitens being charged with 2 felonies and possible impeachment. And this lawyer from Clayton, Watkins, admitted that an anonymous courier delivered $100,000 in cash to his office around the time that the story broke. And apparently, according to what's on the street as of the wee hours of this morning, yesterday during a deposition, another bag of cash, $50,000 in it, was delivered to this same attorney who he represents the husband, the ex-husband of the woman who had the affair with Governor Greitens. So are you seeing a little something going on here? Let me finish this thing up. So you've got Governor Greitens and his team immediately saying this whole thing is a political hit job. Look, there are cash payments going on. And why would someone be willing to part with that much cash? Because the governor has a ton of enemies, and most of them are surrounding this whole tax credit thing. So 3 companies tied to low-income housing tax credits donate thousands of dollars on the same day, a month to the day after you've got the appointment of this Republican to the Missouri Housing Development Corporation. Missouri Growth, Missouri Senior, Missouri AG, Missouri C. Even erstwhile political guru Rex Sinquefield. So there's more. But I hear the music. I'll finish unpacking this for you. It'll have to be after the news and information at the top of the hour from One News Now. So here's what you got to do. Get your libations. Refresh yourself. And buckle up, because we have hour 2 of Stacey on the Right. It's coming at you right after these messages. Stay tuned.
Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Our motto is truth, wisdom, and empowerment. We felt that this motto reflects what we want to be to the urban community. We ask God today to give our community wisdom from God, truth, which is Jesus Christ, and empowerment through the Holy Spirit as we seek to be the community that God has called the Black community to be. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A new report from the Pentagon says retaliation for sexual misconduct complaints is on the rise. Tanya J. Powers has more.
An annual report done by Pentagon officials say there were 146 reports of retaliation last year for filing sexual assault or harassment complaints compared to 84 in 2016. It came in a year that also saw the number of reported sexual assaults go up by 10%. The bulk of the retaliation cases involved women who had filed sexual assault complaints, while less than 20% involved service members who filed sexual harassment complaints. Pentagon officials call the increase in reporting a positive trend because it shows more confidence in the system. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Fresno State holds a community meeting on Thursday to address the controversy over Professor Rhonda Gerard's comments attacking the late Barbara Bush. Jeff Manasso with the latest.
Fresno State University holds a student and staff forum Wednesday with a community forum on Thursday amid the fallout over Professor Rhonda Gerard's tweets calling Barbara Bush an amazing racist.
If this was a Hillary Clinton, all the knives would be out.
Lawrence Jones, editor-in-chief of campusreform.org on Fox and Friends First, University President Joseph Castro said Gerard's comments went beyond free speech, but that she won't be fired, despite a petition signed by 80,000 people and school donors threatening to withhold funding. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
People around the world are mourning the death of Alfie Evans in the United Kingdom. But Chris Woodward reports this is not a first-time problem, and one organization says people need to begin speaking up.
Alfie Evans died over the weekend just a few days shy of what would have been his second birthday. His parents had been in a lengthy battle with the doctors, who said Alfie had a degenerative brain condition and would not recover. Alfie's death follows Charlie Gard's in England, as well as Terry Schiavo's here in the U.S. Stephen Ertelt of LifeNews.com has reported on quite a number of cases.
In fact, Terry Schiavo's brother, Bobby Schindler, now is leading an organization specifically dedicated to helping patients in these kinds of situations. So this is not new. It's getting a lot of media attention and a lot of support and press for obvious reasons. But there are so many cases that don't ever see the light of day, don't ever get a news story or a radio broadcast or what have you. So this is an ongoing problem, not just in the UK, but around the world. And honestly, patients and pro-life people and Christians who are concerned about, their health care, their rights, their right to life, need to speak up right now.
There are efforts in the UK now to prevent further cases like that of Alfie Evans, but Ertelt says we will have more battles, and not just in Europe, but here in the U.S.
So talk to state legislators, talk to your members of Congress, speak out, and in many states we have some similar problems. So say something about it, contact your local pro-life group, find out what the laws are in your state, and speak up about it.
I'm Chris Woodward.
Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says our immigration system needs to be fixed Catherine Herridge has more.
Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says the wall is part of a broader counterterrorism strategy.
We see 15 terrorists either planning to travel or actually traveling to the United States each day.
In New York City for a series of closed-door threat briefings, Nielsen spoke exclusively with Fox News at Ground Zero, not far from the 2017 attack that killed 8 on the West Side Highway.
The terrorist organizations are inspiring followers to just pick a weapon. Right. Bring your own weapon. Use a car, use a knife, use something you can easily pick up.
With the Supreme Court now weighing the third version of the travel ban affecting 5 mostly Muslim countries, Nielsen said the administration remains committed to knowing who's entering the U.S. and whether their home nation is high risk. In Washington, Catherine Herridge, Fox News.
Liquid nicotine products that look like juice boxes, candies, and other kids' snacks came under government scrutiny today, as health authorities warned they could pose a danger to children. The Food and Drug Administration issued more than a dozen warnings over the illegal packaging practice, saying it can lead to poisoning if children mistakenly drink the liquids, which are intended for use with e-cigarettes and vaping devices. Exposure to nicotine, even in small amounts, can cause seizures, coma, and fatal heart problems in children. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Well, the dinner's been going on for a long time.
Since 1914?
There you go, since 1914. And I used to go once upon a time. I went with my father a few years ago. And once it started turning into this sort of like celebrity Oscar red carpet event is when I started being like, this isn't something I really want to be a part of. It didn't really have a lot to do with the comedians that performed at the time. I will say, this is a big gift to Trump supporters. I saw when you were, excuse me, bless you. This is a big gift to Trump supporters. 77% of Americans, 77, believe that the national television and newspaper media outlets report fake news. 89% of Republicans believe that. And there's already this implication when you hear people like Jim Acosta saying that Trump supporters, their brains don't, whatever the quote is, their elevators don't go to the top floor. There's an idea that the media, especially people in D.C., hate the Trump administration, hate Republicans, hate people in the middle of the country. And when you're sitting there, and by the way, Jonathan Karl, Maggie Haberman, Andrea Mitchell, Mika Brzezinski, these are people I would certainly not call conservatives or people in my vein, came out and criticized the dinner as well.
Wow. So that's Meghan McCain on The View talking about the craziness of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And I just want to give you the update directly from The Hill. The Hill is one of the most influential papers. They're the first newspaper to say that they're going to remove their paper from attendance to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. They will no longer participate, thanks to over-the-line jokes made by this year's headliner, Michelle Wolf. The quote from them is that there is simply no reason to participate in something that casts our profession in a poor light. This is from the Hill's chairman, James Finkelstein, in a letter to the White House Correspondents Association. Major changes are needed to the annual event based on what Americans witnessed on national television at Saturday night's dinner. A once fine evening celebrating the strong free press and the WHCA speaks of has turned into an angry display and ad hominem attacks. CNN's Oliver Darcy actually published Finkelstein's comments in a tweet, and the full letter actually. And I think it's instructive. I hope that other news outlets follow along with that. I also want to just point to, I have to, full disclosure, I contribute to The Hill, thehill.com. So I don't do so often, but I do contribute to their paper. So just to let you know that, so that people don't accuse me of promoting it one way or the other. You know, The Hill publishes pieces from people who are left, right, center, you know, all, the entire spectrum. So now I want to go over to just a little bit of news about Facebook. And if you want to call the show and weigh in a little bit, I'm happy to talk to you. Can't wait. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Call lines are open. You can join in the program. This hour, we actually have, I had to update my show sheet. We have an addition. We have Steve Moore. He is a Distinguished Heritage Foundation Fellow. He's going to join to talk about OPEC winning the oil war under President Trump. I'm going to circle back around to the remainder of the story about Governor Greitens and the people who are attacking him and trying to bring him down over these tax credits. But I wanted to give you something that was breaking, and this is fascinating. This is dated today. It's actually a letter from the Parliament of the United Kingdom. It's directed to Mrs. Stimson, who is the head of public policy for Facebook, UK, for British Facebook. The Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee of the House of Commons in London has issued this letter to her. They require more oral evidence from Facebook. They actually had Mike Schroeder appear before the committee yesterday, but they found 40 instances of him not answering their questions. 40. And so they are requiring that Mark Zuckerberg come to London during his next European trip. They are requesting his presence on the 24th of May. Now, they know that he's going to be giving evidence to the European Parliament in May, and that's why they're asking him to just circle his private plane over their way before leaving the general vicinity. Now, they're saying that while Mr. Zuckerberg does not, this is from the letter, it's worth noting that while Mr. Zuckerberg does not normally come under the jurisdiction of the UK Parliament, he will do so the next time he enters the country. We hope that he will respond positively to our request. But if not, the committee will resolve to issue a formal summons for him to appear when he is next in the UK. And then they go on to describe the list of questions, the transcript of yesterday's session. They want replies by May 11 so that they can factor the answers into planning for the evidence they hope to take from Mr. Zuckerberg a fortnight later. They use the word fortnight. And as I said yesterday, and this is, I'm reading from the letter, as I said yesterday, there are over 40 million Facebook users in the UK, and they deserve to hear accurate answers from the company he created, whether or not it is able to keep their users' data safe. We look forward to receiving your answers by 11 May and confirmation of Mr. Zuckerberg's attendance at their hearing on the 24th by the same date. Now, that's interesting. Well, you know what's even more interesting? Facebook has just announced that it will take 3 years for them to fix the problems that have been outlined. 3 years. 3 years. Oh, and I'm on Wired.com, and they're giving me a notification that I've read half of my complimentary articles for the month. If I want to read more, I'll have to subscribe. The paywalls are going up, folks. So Mr. Zuckerberg gave a keynote speech at F8 this year, and F8 is an annual developers conference that happens on a yearly basis. It talks about new products and technology, and you know, it's interesting that he's saying it's going to take 3 years to fix Facebook. I thought they were so cutting edge and their algorithms could fix anything. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that any further than to say that clearly he's under fire, and that's why he's open to some regulations, because he's hoping that will kind of calm people down and give them a little bit less animus towards the company. So back to this story here in Missouri. So if you're just joining the program, the title of today's show is all about this $50,000 bag of cash, the governor of the state of Missouri, and the tax credits that he's trying to eliminate because they're a slush fund and they only benefit developers. It's Americans who live in the state of Missouri, their taxes are being paid, and these developers are getting the benefit of the taxation by utilizing this system to enrich themselves for doing low-income housing developments. So now you've got the governor, and he's appointed Jason Crowell, a Republican, to the Missouri Housing Development Corporation, and then the MHDC awards no tax credits for that year, enraging developers. And then you've got this lawyer, Albert Watkins, who has received these bags of cash. So the committees that I named off in the last segment there, these committees actually have the cash in them. So the money's not going directly to people at first. At first, it's just going into these committees. But then you've got, and the money that went to the committees is $150,000 into those 4 committees. Now, that sounds like, okay, so what? So doesn't everybody donate to political committees? Sure they do. But the committees all have a connection to Tilly. Now, Tilly used to be a state senator, state rep. He's maxed out, termed out on all that stuff, and now he's a lobbyist. Tilly actually doesn't really, there's no friendship there between Tilly and Greitens. Now, each of the committees that we named off that have the $150,000 in them in total have been paying Tilly's sister, who's an accountant, for accounting work, and they've been paying David Barklage, who, full disclosure, I know him well, who in effect was evicted from his Jefferson City office by the governor when one of Greitens' donors bought the building and turned it into the headquarters of the governor's Dark Money Committee, a New Missouri. So Tilly and Barklage have both been paid by Lieutenant Governor Mike Parsons as consultants. Tilly has been a major Parson donor. Parson would become governor if Greitens were to resign or be impeached. Does that make sense now? So why would someone bring $50,000 in cash in a bag to the lawyer representing the husband of the woman who never wanted any of this information to come out, but the husband did? Why did the husband want to embarrass not just his ex-wife, but their daughter and himself, and completely place all of their personal business out in the public for the world to see and pick through? Well, would a bag with $50,000 in cash in it motivate you? More to come. So that's the story. And it sounds ludicrous and crazy and amazing and unbelievable, and it is. All over tax credits, which, as according to information that I have, the line item in the budget for those tax credits is $152 million. That's a lot of change. I suppose it'd be worth it if you needed to spend $150,000 to get access to the $152 million. Might be something you'd be interested in doing. Just saying. All right. So now I want to get to, and I want to head over to the different sites that are currently broadcasting our live streams and just take a look and see what people are saying. Actually, I'm going to go over to the Facebook live stream and see what people are saying over there. And if you want to share the live streams, just hit the share button. Hit it. If you're on Periscope, hit the heart button so people know that you like the program. Helps with the metrics, and we really appreciate that. Also, if you're listening to the show and you've ordered Stacy on the Right Show mugs, I'm a little behind on getting those out because I have to order them from a third party, but those are going to be complete this week. That's gonna happen. Okay, so we have some people who are listening from Great Britain who are saying they're British and they haven't heard about the letter. Well, the letter's online and the text of it's online, and it's from the British government there, and they're definitely interested in speaking to Mark Zuckerberg. Like, when I say interested, they're planning on speaking with him. They're not going to be taking no for an answer. They're basically saying the next time you come into our jurisdiction, you will speak to us, or you're going to have major problems because we're going to make you speak to us. That's pretty fascinating. And so hello to everybody, Grand Rapids, Michigan, tons of people listening in from all over the country. Thanks so much for tuning into the program. So I want to give you, as we're going out of this break here, we're going to be doing, I'm going to be at the NRA convention in Dallas, and there's going to be a whole lot of really great content coming onto the show. And I also want to point to the newsletter, which, so your feedback is integral here. But in order for you to give me feedback on the newsletter, you actually have to open it up if you've subscribed and take a look at it. Click the link and go all the way through. And then when you do, take a look at what you see. And then if you like it, awesome. If you want to see something different, simple as an email, leave a comment somewhere on the blog, any of that stuff. I get notifications. And we'd love to hear from you on what you think about the newsletter that we're putting out. It's once a week, or if something special happens, but usually nothing special is happening. It's just all the fantasticness of the regular everyday today. So we'll be listening to a little bit more. Actually, our next guest, I'm sorry, we have our next guest up. After this break, we're going to have our next guest is Steve Moore. He's a Heritage Foundation Fellow, and he's going to be talking to us about the OPEC oil war under Trump. There are some surprising statistics about our oil production and how we're now approaching levels that have only been seen with OPEC. So we're really competing now. And I know people get so like, is it the government or is it the government getting out of the way? It's the government getting out of the way. It's the government unleashing the power of the private sector that allows us to have fantastic oil production, which then we sell the natural resource, and then we profit off of it. And we can use that money to do whatever we want. Why would we be against that? Why would we be against tapping natural resources? I know for people who don't believe in that, they somehow feel that the natural resources are going to go away and there just won't be enough. Really? That's not what's going to happen. There's no danger of us using up all of the oil that we have and it going away. So let's be sensible about that. So we'll be talking about that, doing a little bit more information with Steve Moore. He's a distinguished fellow from the Heritage Foundation. And then also we'll have some chat in the last segment where you guys can call in if you want. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And we'll be talking about what the options are since the Iran deal is just falling apart before our very eyes. Fantastic that he didn't actually have to dismantle it. It's falling apart on its own. Thanks, Barack Obama. All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you. Stay right there.
Trust can be defined as the assured reliance on the character of another, a fiduciary relationship wherein funds are held under specific conditions, or an American family coffee with a hint of blueberry cobbler, announcing the return of one of our favorites. Trust is a medium roast Brazilian coffee with notes of sweet blueberries, vanilla, and spices, and your purchase helps support the American Family Association. Trust, available for a limited time from afastore.net.
Come to 1milliondads.com. Be strengthened as a Christian leader for your wife and children, your church, your community. We believe that missing fathers is what's wrong with this country. No longer should men be weak or ineffective. 1milliondads.com is where we can learn and grow together as men of the cross. 1milliondads.com. Lead, or others will.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A new report by the Centers for Disease Control finds that teenage virgins are healthier than other students who are sexually active. At first, you might think that this is merely an obvious conclusion since virgins are not likely to contract a sexually transmitted disease. But the conclusions are based on many other factors as well. Students who are virgins actually rate significantly and consistently better in nearly all health-related behaviors and measures than their sexually active peers. Let's look at a few examples. Sexually active teens are 3,000% more likely to smoke daily than their virginal peers. And same-sex and bisexually sexually active teens are 9,000% more likely than virginal teens. The same dichotomy exists with dating violence. Sexually active teens are 260% more likely to experience some form of physical violence in dating relationships. Same-sex and bisexual sexually active teens are 600% more likely than their virginal peers. And as you might expect, there's a real difference in terms of alcohol and drug use. Sexually active teens are 337% more likely to binge drink than teen virgins. They're also 336% more likely to use marijuana and 500% more likely to have injected a drug than teen virgins. All of these statistics reinforce the idea that sexual chastity and involved parenting make a difference in the lives of teenagers. Some of the activities may not directly relate to being a virgin or being sexually active, but they do show a strong correlation between two different mindsets. Teens that control their sexual urges are usually making wise decisions about other aspects of their lives. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is the website. Also, StacyOnTheRight.com or AFR.net. Thank you so much for being tuned into the show. Thank you for everyone who shares the program and comments and subscribes to all of our good stuff. Thank you for that. It's my pleasure to welcome Distinguished Fellow from the Heritage Foundation, Steve Moore. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because anytime I hear about oil production or Americans, sending our products out of this country and selling it, that gets me excited. I'm glad to hear it. Tell us more.
Well, it's a great story. I mean, it's a great Made in America story. It's a great America success story that the United States of America, by the end of this year, or certainly by the beginning this time next year, we will be producing more oil and gas than any other country in the world. By the way, by about 2020, in a couple of years, we could be the number one. We could be essentially energy independent. That is, selling more oil and gas on net than we're buying. And it's been 50, 60 years since that happened in America. So it's a great day for America when that happens, and it's due to the shale oil and gas revolution, which has almost overnight tripled the amount of oil and gas we have in this country. And we're not running out of oil and gas, ladies and gentlemen. We're running into it.
So let's dig into that a little further. Why is this happening now as opposed to under President Obama?
Well, it started under Obama, no question about it, but it was because of, first of all, the reason that this is happening is because of these new technologies like hydraulic fracturing, which allows us to get at the shale oil and gas, which has been there for, a million years, but we never figured out how to get at it, and we finally cracked the code through fracking. And then horizontal drilling, where these drills now go 2 miles deep in the ground, and then they can go like a spider web in any direction. It's made our drilling facilities and much, much more productive. So that's a very positive thing for the United States. We're technologically way ahead of the rest of the world. Now, it started under Obama, ironically enough, but Obama then tried to do everything he could to stop it because, of course, Obama hated fossil fuels. And so now we have a situation where where we are producing more than just about any other country other than Saudi Arabia and Russia, and we'll soon move past them because Trump has allowed drilling on public lands. He's gotten rid of a lot of the environmental regulations that tried to stunt the growth of this industry. He's also very pro-mining. He's very pro-coal production. So all these things are very positive for the United States and our economy.
Okay, so I saw conspiracy theories on Twitter as recently as over the weekend that we have major earthquakes happening in the United States due to fracking. Let's debunk that real quick.
So, there have been, there are some worries about, fracking having an impact on earthquakes. I'm not a geologist, so I'm not an expert on this. The industry is working on it. There is, look, oil drilling has been going on for over 100 years. This is just a new technique that we're using. It has to be done safely. We have to do it in a way that doesn't cause earthquakes. We have to do it in a way that doesn't cause pollution of our groundwater. But I think they're making great progress in that. And the solution isn't to stop fracking. The solution is to figure out how to do it in a safe and environmentally friendly way. And I think we're well on the way to getting there.
I'm with you. If we don't have proof that it's specifically fracking that's causing earthquakes, why scare people? Why frighten people with that kind of rhetoric? And what's interesting about it is...
Well, the reason is because the left hates fossil fuels. So they would rather that we didn't have these fossil fuels, and that way they think we could use, something like, wind power and solar power, which is now 5% of our energy. We would have massive blackouts and brownouts throughout this country if we allowed the left to run our energy policy, God forbid.
And then I have to mention it. The other thing that when you just mentioned that we've been drilling for oil for years, I really encourage people to do a little just quick Google search or a YouTube video to watch what oil extraction really entails when we talk about oil rigs, people think it's out floating in the ocean and it might be digging on the surface of something. These are complex structures that stretch across the seabed, and they're moored and anchored into the bottom of the ocean, the sea floor. And then they dig down with complex cabling and systems that there's computers involved. There's a lot of communicating going through these lines and wires that are inside these big, huge cables. And they do this over the course of many years where they extract oil from certain sites, and then they lift the rig, detach it, and move it to another location. Or they retire that rig and install a new rig to do even more advanced extraction techniques. This is not just somebody with a big drill bit drilling down and, loosing a bunch of oil and sucking it up with a tube. It's so much more than that.
It's technology, it's know-how, it's innovation, it's ingenuity. And, the original rigs, 100 years ago went down maybe 500 feet into the ground. Now we're talking about 2 miles deep, and we're talking about miles, northward, southward, westward, eastward. It's incredible to see. This is a story of American know-how. And the good news is that we're way ahead of the rest of the world. They haven't figured it out yet. So this allows us to take a commanding position. As Donald Trump says, we want to be the energy dominant country in the world, and we have the capacity to do that. We just have to allow the energy producers of our country to produce the resources that we have. And we're God has endowed America with some of the greatest resources in the world. And we need to use these resources so that we can grow our economy, create jobs, and become less susceptible to things like terrorism if we don't have to send money to the Middle East and countries that are trying to kill us.
You make such a good point. I mean, how can you be against something that makes us stronger and protects us from terrorism? I mean, I'm just waiting for someone to give me a good reason why I shouldn't be for that.
I am too. I mean, it seems so obvious. I mean, in economics, we call this a no-brainer. I mean, we get jobs, we get oil and gas that's produced here in the United States. We get all sorts of benefits in terms of our increase in our GDP and our growth rate, and then of course we get the safety from not having to send money abroad. As I said, we all know that the terrorists across the world, whether it's ISIS or the Taliban or whatever terrorist network it is, we know where they get their money. We don't have to scratch our head and think, gee, where did they get the money to do this? It came from petrodollars, and let's stop sending those dollars to those countries.
And the other thing that it does is it completely shifts the dynamic on the world stage when America becomes an energy producer instead of just a primary consumer. It changes the way other nations look at us and the way they interact with us, because they have to acknowledge that our energy dominance creates a different dynamic for our interactions. I just don't understand why we don't want that.
That's very well said. I can't say it any better than that. It changes the whole geopolitical situation where, in the 21st century, we want North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico to be the new Middle East. I called my article that you're referring to Saudi America, because we are the new Saudi Arabia. But we just have to have a president, as we do now, who wants America to produce this stuff and believes that, look, we're going to be using fossil fuels for at least the next 30 or 40 years, even if they do, develop some of these renewable resources. So at least for the next several decades, we're going to be using a lot of oil and gas and coal. By the way, let's not leave out coal. You know this, the country that has more coal than any other nation in the world is the United States. Why wouldn't we use our coal?
And, I mean, obviously, the monetary benefits are staggering. The opportunities for us. You have a chart on here on your article. I'll put it in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. It says, goodbye OPEC. America's on the way to energy dominance. And in your chart, it's pretty simple. Like, any person can look at this chart and see that we're totally killing it. Domestic crude oil and natural gas production in quadrillion BTUs is up. I mean, it's just like the line goes straight up, and the imports, the red line, goes straight down. I mean, it's fantastic for us. There is no better way of understanding this. You look at the chart, and then you have a whole article here.
Well, thank you for the endorsement. And, I've actually got to run and do a TV interview now, but I'll say this on the way out. As you said, the math is easy here. Every time we produce another barrel of oil here, whether it's in Oklahoma or North Dakota or Texas or California or Pennsylvania, that's one less barrel of oil that we have to buy from countries that are our enemies. So it's a great pro-America story, and we will. By the end of Donald Trump's first term in office, I believe we will be the number one producer of oil and gas, and we will also be, exporting this stuff rather than importing it. What a great story that is.
I love it. We will let you go and get to TV. I know how that is, running from thing to thing.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Stephen Moore, he's a distinguished fellow at the Heritage Foundation. So glad to have him on for a quick interview to discuss his article. I just placed it in the comments on the Facebook pages. And I just got to say, it's like you discover something awesome, like you have the talent to make a product that people love and want. And everyone around you says, don't sell that. Don't make that. And you're like, why? I'm making money. I'm taking care of myself. No, you need to continue to be dependent upon us and let others take care of you, because you making and selling that product will damage the environment. And then you say, well, where's the evidence? I want to see how my product damages the environment, because if there's a way for me to, clean it up, I want to do that because I got this gift here. I can do something here. And they just, blow smoke at you. You're just like, I can't get a straight answer out of these people. And the reason I'm so sure that Stephen Moore is right, I mean, his article is fantastic. The information's out there for us to read, but there is nothing that demonstrates it more clearly than I told you guys. We took the vacation to Galveston, and for people who look down their nose at Galveston, we went. Obviously, it was spring break, and we did go to the beach twice, but the majority of our time was spent touring the town of Galveston, and we went to the Oceana oil rig, and it is moored in the bay there at Galveston. And it's a fully, this is the rig itself that the people used to live on, that they used to actually, extract oil in. They lived there, they worked there, they moored it into the bay there, and now you can tour it. And I tell you, I know they have more than one of these in the United States that you can tour. And so I have no preference. I've only been to the one, but obviously they're all going to give you the same information. What I learned is that almost everything we use all over the place, from these computers to our smartphones, everything, are made from oil-based products. So it's not just the oil that goes into the car that fuels your vehicle, your truck, your minivan, your RV. We're talking about the things that we use on an everyday basis that are oil products. They're products that are made from oil derivatives, oil itself. Then there's, as Stephen Moore talked about, the technology. I had no idea. Now, I knew it was more complex than simply drilling a hole into the ocean floor and extracting oil. But when he says they go down and then they go out to the side, they literally first map the ocean floor. They find the pockets of oil, and they're not always in the same, like there'll be a pocket in one location and then there'll be a pocket that's adjacent. They access the first pocket, and while they're down there, they efficiently drill over to the side and access the next pocket as well. In extracting the oil, they communicate through these huge cables. The cable is like the size of a salad plate in diameter. And inside that cable are all of these other individual cables, lines of wire. There's in the center is the extractor for the oil itself. All of those wire lines are communicating with computers and all this technology all over the place on the oil rig, the computers that control the drillers, everything. We were just dumbfounded. They have you come in, you watch a video at first, and they talk about, some of the misconceptions, and then they give you like a preview, and then you go around on a self-guided tour all over the rig, and you see, obviously the Oceana is pretty old, so some of the things that you see, like their sleeping quarters and their restrooms, it's a little older. It's not one of the more modern ones, but they give you in little videos that you can watch at different locations along the tour where you can learn about some of the things that are the truth. And then they have these scaled models of the ocean floor. And so you're standing in front of the scaled model, and the scale model is like bigger than your living room or your kitchen. It's the ocean floor. It shows the floor of the ocean. It has a glass wall around it to simulate the water level. And you can see an oil rig, the thing you're standing on, scaled down with teeny little people, little models on it. And then the lines going down to the floor, not the floor, the seafloor. The lines are going down, and you can see the actual moorings and how much longer the moorings are that tie that oil rig to the seafloor, how much longer those are than the actual rig itself is tall. It is a feat of wonder. And so that's what we're talking about here. When you see environmentalists stomping their feet and doing $1 billion worth of trash and damage to certain sites to protest the technological advancements, where we're talking about engineers, people who've been to school for 5 years, people who were smarter than these environmentalists when they graduated from high school. And an engineering student is often smarter than these women's studies, gender studies, African American studies, pan-cultural studies, pan-Asian studies. Those graduates from those programs have about the same IQ level and intelligence as a first-year engineering student. Meanwhile, the people who build these oil rigs and create this environment that brings all of this resource to bear so that we can have this advanced, technologically stunning society, these are people who've graduated from engineering school, so they have 5 years of education under their belt, and often they go on for their master's. These people are doing amazing things on behalf of all of us. And we never have to know anything about engineering. We just get to use the products and live. So that's the music. We'll be back with more Stacy on the Right after this. Keep it here.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
Tony and I are different in many, many ways. Tony's parents were very kind but relatively quiet people. My parents, on the other hand, were kind and talkative people. I was raised in a fast-paced, loud household. And I think back to the dinner table. It was so noisy. Everybody was talking at the same time, and we're passing food around, and it was crazy. So the first key to an uncommon marriage is to recognize that every single one of us brought expectations and differences into our marriage.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God. One man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Thursday, May 3rd is the National Day of Prayer. Here's Dr. Ronnie Floyd, National Day of Prayer President.
Our heart is one thing ultimately, that we mobilize unified public prayer for America, that at least on one day a year, we do everything we can to mobilize people to praying for our country.
The American Family Association encourages you to meet with other Christians at your city hall from 12:20 to 12:40, Thursday, May 3rd, the National Day of Prayer.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something or why you couldn't attend a certain event instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God. But fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to Him. With our Heart for the Urban Family, I'm today's Urban Woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Earlier this morning, we spoke to former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice about Israel's claim and how the U.S. should respond. We asked her if she's seen any evidence that Iran has violated that 2015 accord.
First of all, the reason that we have been so concerned about Iran is that we know that they lie and cheat about their nuclear. I suspect that it simply reinforces what we've always known, that the Iranians were secretly developing nuclear weapons at secret sites. It doesn't perhaps speak to the 2015 agreement, except in the following way. You have to worry about verification with the Iranians, and the verification measures in the 2015 agreement were not very strong. They had, for instance, long periods of notification, long periods of dispute resolution. And so when you know that a country lies about its nuclear weapons, a verification regime that is weak is really problematic.
And that's Condoleezza Rice, eminently qualified to comment on this particular juncture with this deal that is, it really wasn't a deal. Turns out it really wasn't the deal that we've been sold. Lots of people talking about the Iranians and what's happened with them. And I find it fascinating that we haven't heard a peep out of President Obama. You would think he'd be right out there. You know how he loves to take to Twitter to make a comment whenever something occurs that has anything to do with his so-called legacy. He's kind of giving us the crickets right now. Maybe he'll come out with something. But she went on, and this is audio from her on two separate interviews. On one, she's on Fox and Friends. On the other, she's on, I believe, NBC. And they did an extensive long-range interview with her to discuss this. In this next cut, she says, ending the Iran deal is not the end of the world if Trump leaves this nuclear deal. And it's interesting. Listen to what she has to say here. It's number 2.
Had various members of the Trump administration testify publicly to Congress that there is no proof that Iran is violating the 2015 accord. What is the damage if President Trump withdraws from that accord?
Well, let me say, Nora, I wouldn't have signed this agreement to begin with. I've said that before. I think it was a weak agreement, particularly on verification. It allows Iran to break out after a specific period of time. I probably would have stayed in for alliance management reasons more than anything else. But I don't think that it's the end of the world if the administration leaves the agreement. Now, I'm hoping that the conversations the president has had, for instance, with President Macron of France, would suggest that we could approve the agreement. And perhaps if that could be done, this could go. But the administration's been worried about this agreement from the very beginning, and there's reason to be worried about this agreement.
Wow. So there are reasons to be worried about the agreement. And which agreement are we talking about? It's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is the formal name for the Iran nuclear deal. So that's her on NBC. Now she's on Fox and Friends in the morning, and she's talking about 3 pieces of advice for negotiating with North Korea. And this is still Condoleezza Rice, but she's switching topics, talking about North Korea and what we can do as a nation to negotiate with them to create a deal that would prevent them from moving forward with their nuclear aspirations. It's number 5.
What advice do you have for our president when he does sit down with Kim Jong-un?
Well, first of all, don't try to negotiate the details with Kim Jong-un. Leave that to people who understand all the nuances of this situation. There are other countries that have interest here. Japan, for instance, has interest here. South Korea, of course, has interest here. So that's the first thing. It really recognizes that others are at stake. Secondly, don't be anxious about moving American military forces. American military forces are a stabilizing force, not just on the Korean Peninsula, but in the region as a whole. And finally, never forget what the nature of this regime really is. This is a regime that murdered an American citizen just a little while ago, a regime where the leader had his half-brother murdered in Malaysia using VX gas, a brutal regime, human rights violations, a death camp for its own citizens. Don't forget the nature of the regime.
Wow. So again, pretty amazing that Condoleezza Rice is kind of out again and discussing these things, and I'm really happy about it myself. So now let's talk a little bit about today's press briefing from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. She took the podium today, first time taking the podium after the horrendous behavior. Well, actually, she was at the podium yesterday. So second day taking the podium after the horrendous behavior that was leveled at her at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And I think she did admirably. I'm reading through the transcript of her comments today. The majority of the questions had to do with Chief of Staff Kelly, whether or not he would be staying on. I don't know if you guys have begun to notice a theme here, but what happens is you'll have someone in the cabinet of President Trump. The news media will say this person called the president a name. And then they'll take up with story after story after story, day after day, of saying that this person is on their way out of the White House. Sometimes it comes true, sometimes it doesn't. But I almost feel as if what we're seeing is a precursor to them trying to get rid of John Kelly. And by them, I mean whatever reporters are now going with this. It's a rumor. It's something that is based on someone saying they heard him say this horrible thing about the president. He called him a name. And then story after story after story, we've heard in the background that President Trump's going to get rid of him. I don't believe it. Now, there were also some questions to Sarah Huckabee Sanders about the list of questions, which we did ask our first guest of the program today about that. And what is it? Well, you've got the questions. They've been leaked, and they want to ask Sarah Huckabee Sanders. They asked her whether or not the White House would comment on it. And she referred them to outside counsel. Now, there's a reason why that's kind of important. And the reason that, in my opinion, that really makes a difference here is because anything having to do with this issue, they don't want the White House press secretary commenting on it. They want to have the attorneys who are involved in defense of the president, for them to be the ones who are the purveyors of that information, to keep command and control over what gets shared and disseminated. So the next question was about a so-called reprieve that the EU, Canada, and Mexico are receiving. It's a 30-day reprieve for the tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. Now, the question is, what's going to take place during the 30-day period, and what are the chances that the exemption the exemption that's been given will be made permanent for the EU, Canada, and Mexico? Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded that they're extending the negotiations because they've seen some progress, but she's not going to get ahead of what it might look like. They have 30 days to continue with the negotiations, and they're hopeful that they can get something that works for everyone. They asked some questions about Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. She referred them to Michael Cohen. And there were a number of other, I'm looking to see if there's anything like revelatory here that's kind of breaking news that we can share here on the program. And so far, I'm not seeing anything that's really crazy, except obviously they had some questions about the NRA meetings this week. And one of the White House reporters asked if it's insensitive for the president to address the NRA given the epidemic of gun violence. And she says, certainly, as we have indicated on many occasions, safety is a big priority. Security is a big priority for the administration. We also support the Second Amendment and strongly support it, and don't see there to be a problem with speaking to the National Rifle Association. Wow. Okay. So, I think she's right. And also, I want to clear up, there's a big story that's been making the rounds, and I really hate it. It happens almost every year. People say that the NRA is not abiding by their own mandates, which is that the NRA doesn't like limits on gun ownership or what people can, where people can carry. So you can carry your firearms, legally procured firearms, in Texas if you have a concealed carry permit. But you cannot carry firearms in any location that the president is located in. So during the time that the president and vice president are addressing the National Rifle Association, during those times, firearms will not be permitted. Now, this is not by a call by the National Rifle Association, it's a call by the Secret Service. And the Secret Service have the right to lay out parameters in which they will bring protected individuals into a space. And this is so simple and so easy. Any child that I was bump into any child and explain this situation, they would understand it immediately. It is not the National Rifle Association who's making this call. It is the Secret Service. And the reason that they don't allow individuals who are concealed carry certified, the most law-abiding citizens in the entire country, to carry in the presence of Secret Service is because their job is to protect the president and vice president from those types of threats. So it's not a statement about whether or not the National Rifle Association wants people disarmed. It is because it is Secret Service protocol to make the environment in which the protected individuals operate safe before they arrive. That's it. So if they have metal detectors and they have controlled access points, dogs there that are trained to sniff for gunpowder residue, and armed Secret Service personnel, I think they're, I'm not even sure if I don't want to share the number that I've heard that will be there in the room present during the times that the president and vice president are speaking. If that's the case, help me out here, then does that not make sense? Has nothing to do with the National Rifle Association. So it's not a double standard. It's not hypocrisy. And I don't understand why people would say that, other than they just don't like the NRA. To which I say, get in line. The haters the line for haters is long. Enjoy it. So, in addition to that, in wrapping up news for the day, I want to pivot over to education. And these are some abysmally disappointing numbers, but I want to share them with you because this is the most important thing we can do, which is you take the information and then you govern yourself accordingly. And I see a lot of pushback in the news media. Certain organizations, certain legislatures, specifically in California, are trying to put the kibosh on homeschooling because it's becoming very prevalent. Now, of course, they're doing so because they claim that there's some kind of child abuse going on. And when there are instances of child abuse, the homeschooling is not the primary issue. Now, is it? But okay, so, logic doesn't work with people who are illogical. So this story is over at cnsnews.com, and it's horrible news for public education. 65% of 8th graders in American public schools in 2017 were not proficient in reading. 67% were not proficient in math. This is according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress test results released by the U.S. Department of Education. And if you think those numbers are horrible, the numbers for students enrolled in the urban districts is even worse. Among the 27 large urban districts for which the Department of Education published 2017 NAEP test scores, Detroit Public Schools had the lowest percentage of students who scored proficient or advanced in math and the lowest percentage who scored proficient or better in reading. Only 5% of Detroit's public school 8th graders were proficient or above grade level in math. Only 7% were proficient or better in reading. In Cleveland, similar horrible numbers. Only 11% were proficient in math, 10% for reading. And the numbers just keep on going down. They have a chart here where you can see the worst areas. And I'm just going to check for St. Louis here because we are, I think, still a major city, top 30 city. Wow, I don't see St. Louis on the list. Interesting. Usually we're included. Here we are, Missouri. On the state list, we're 30. We rank number 30 by percentage of 8th graders who are proficient in mathematics. Wow. So here are your options. If you're a parent and you've got kids in public school, the first thing you have to know is where your kids score on these proficiency exams. If your child is below grade level, it's not the end of the world. I'm here to encourage you. Research shows that a motivated parent who has activated that motivation in their child, in other words, instead of saying, you suck, you're an idiot, you're not good at math, you're not good. No, instead you say, the brain is like a muscle, and a muscle that's weak needs to be strengthened through exercise. And you tell that kid, we're going to get this under control. We're going to learn this information, and we're going to put this as our primary focus. We're going to cut the TV off. We're going to dial down on the sports. We're going to spend more time together eating as a family, reading the Bible, and studying for school. And you can get more than a year's worth of growth if you put those things in proper order. It's not, this is horrible news, but it's not the end of the story. Any parent can institute this change in their child by simply speaking to them positively. Of course, you got to pray over them, and then you change the trajectory. We got to do something. At this rate, no one will be able to read or do math in this country. All right, that's the show for today. God bless you. Find me online, Stacy on the Right. Have a great night.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others.